Hi, I'm Joseph, and I built a business in my 20s. 5 years on, I have 4 businesses, soon to be 5, but more on that another time. One of which is now a 6-figure business working with clients all across the UK. And my hope with this video and this channel is that by sharing my experiences, people who are maybe on the fence about starting their own will be able to start their own business. I was in my 20s, living at home with my parents, and at the time I was working within an accounting firm in Norwich, which is where I used to live, and I was training to be a chartered accountant when I had this idea to start a business. And it didn't happen overnight. I was traveling into work with one of my best friends, Emilio, who was also working in another firm in Norwich. And I think we'd both been in our firms for about 2 years at this point. And so we'd experienced a fair amount in slightly different areas, worked with loads of different clients, big clients, small clients in various industries. And we just, at the same time, started to moan about the same things, the same problems that we were having in our day jobs, which was specific to the accounting industry. It was that we were dealing with clients and we would speak to them, maybe it was our turn to speak to them for their annual accounts, for example, and they would moan that, oh, hang on, I haven't heard from anyone in a year. Like, what's this? Why am I hearing about you now and I've got to pay this corporation tax, you know? All these sort of gripes that these clients had. And it seems so simple to us. We're like, well, why aren't we talking to the clients more often? And it was because in both these firms, you know, the system was just to bring in as many apprentices and trainees as possible, and to bring in as many clients as possible, whether they're tiny clients or large clients, and they would just be chucked at these client managers who would then have these trainees under them. I was one of those trainees. So we were just dealing with, hundreds and hundreds of clients with accounts and VAT returns and bookkeeping and payroll, you name it, we're doing all the services. And that means that the client manager doesn't have enough time to dedicate to each of those clients. So they ended up speaking to them once a year for their accounts, and that was it. And we were like, well, can we improve on this? And we kept on talking about it. We were, traveling to and from work. And I remember, we would we'd go to the gym in the morning and we'd just be moaning constantly about this and various other things, in the team and just general communication and the culture and things like that. Because hypocritical. We were working in the accounting industry, that's what we wanted to be doing. But at the same time, we said how much we hated it because it just felt a bit dull and grey, which is the impression that most people get from accountants. We're like, well, can we change that? If we were business owners, would we want to be a client of this firm? And the answer was no. And that's how we started. We said, well, can we do that? Can we create a firm that if we were the clients, would we, if we were Googling accountants in Norwich or in the UK, would we be scrolling and land on us and think, yeah, those are the guys I want to work with? So that's where we started. We thought, yeah, let's create a brand and an identity that if clients like us, sort of younger entrepreneurial clients, were looking for a firm to work with, we would be that firm. So we did just that. We were still working, but we would go home and we were just coming up with ideas. We were talking about names and we were kind of sketching logos and how it could look. And that was our starting point, was the brand. How would it make the client feel if they were working with us, or if they saw us on Google or on social media? And what we landed on was actually a fairly traditional name, but paired with a very modern and kind of edgy branding. So we ended up calling our firm Heat and Fences, which is a combination of our last names, which is very traditional in this industry and kind of the professional services industry. But our thinking, at least, was we were in our 20s. So if we were going out and pitching ourselves to clients, whether they are sort of more established businesses, and the business owners will tend to be older than us, and also pitching to maybe clients a similar age to us, we were thinking it would attract both of those groups, because if they heard this more traditional name, so if an older business owner, more established business heard this more traditional name, they might not be turned away as much as if it was a separate brand name. And so that's where we landed. And pretty soon after that, we did set up the business. And granted, it's professional services, so it wasn't like we had to create a product and be ready to sort of launch it into a market. The product is us, it's the service. So it's our time. So actually, how we started was, we figured, okay, who do we know that owns a business? Who isn't happy with their accountant? Let's ask around. And we did just that. We ended up speaking to people we'd worked with in the past, or people just like kind of in our local networks. We just asked the question, and we weren't in a position where we were kind of worried about being turned away or people saying no, because we didn't have any clients. We didn't have anything. And as soon as we had maybe a handful of clients, at that point we said, okay, maybe we'll put a bit of money into the business and start thinking about a website and actually putting the brand to use. And that meant putting stuff on social media as well. And we were doing all of it ourselves, which saved a lot of money in the early days. And actually, just going back on why we started the business, we both had this feeling of wanting to build something that was like, bigger than us. We both had this like feeling of wanting to create something and put something out there, which I think about often. I think I've come to understand since then that when I bet most people have this, that you have this feeling of having the ability to create something, and when you aren't able to put that energy into actually creating that thing, you kind of suppress it, and I'm pretty sure it can turn into sort of really negative feelings and also depression in extreme cases. So this was our way of being creative, putting ourselves out there. And I also mentioned about when we were having this idea of thinking, okay, if we were clients, would we want to work with this accounting firm? This idea of an accounting firm that we had. And actually, before we set up this accounting firm, we kind of put that into practice, and we very nearly set up a clothing brand. And it was serious. We wanted to do that. This was when we were still working in these other accounting firms. And, so we were working with a friend of ours, a designer, come up with the designs, and we were kind of backing him in terms of the business and the admin side. And it was going through that process that we came to that idea of, hang on, granted we were accountants as well, so we could probably have sorted ourselves out, but if we were looking at accounting firms, who would we be looking at to join? And actually, we didn't find anyone we would want to join, because none of them really ticked the boxes for us in terms of matching our, you could say, vibe, I guess. We wanted to be excited. We wanted to partner with someone who we felt were going to understand our business and be kind of as involved as we were and as excited and enthusiastic as we were. So that's when we said, well, let's kind of take those ideas of creating the clothing brand, which was like, the whole thing was pretty much creating the brand. And we said, okay, here's the logo. It's going to put it on all these shirts and tote bags, whatever. We thought, well, let's do the same thing, but it's an accounting firm. Like, have that mindset of creating a really cool brand that's going to like build a community and all of that, which you typically associate with a clothing brand. Granted, you probably haven't seen the business Heat and Fences before and seen how we kind of present the brand. And it's things like, we've got skate decks in the office with the logo on and things like that. It's just like the small things where we think if we'd seen that as a client looking at an accounting firm, we'd think, yeah, that's a bit different. That looks pretty cool. I'd like to work with them. So it's that kind of thing that kind of builds that community of clients and makes them feel like they're part of something that is exciting and is really, is also going to help them as well. If obviously we nearly created the clothing brand, which I think would have been the business if we weren't training as accountants, and we probably would have set that up. So in another life. But what I realized once starting our first accounting firm is that, and because I'd watched so many videos of other business owners, kind of like building in public, and pretty much all of them say the same thing, which is they wish they understood or wish they'd invested more in their finance function, so the finance side of their business, a lot earlier on, and wish they understood it a lot earlier on. Ben Francis of Gymshark is the one that comes to mind for me. I always think he was doing an interview or a podcast, and he said just that he wished he'd invested in the finance function of his business a lot earlier on. And also, there's probably one of the most famous investors out there, Warren Buffett. He's got a famous quote, which is, "Accounting is the language of business." And that is absolutely true. I've trained in accountancy since I left school, and I've come to realize that if you understand accounting, even in a very basic level, which anybody can find some videos on YouTube and get a basic understanding, as soon as you have that understanding, you understand how a business operates. And as soon as that quote is so true. Accounting is the language of business. It's what makes the business run. If a business fails, it's always to do with the accounting. The cash isn't there in the business. We didn't project. The profit wasn't there. We didn't understand what the figures meant. It all comes back to accounting. So that's probably one thing I would urge everyone, if you're looking to start a business, to start there. Just look at some basic accounting videos on YouTube. It won't take you long at all. And actually, that's one of the things we kind of major at with our clients, is that we don't just provide the services, we actually educate them along the way, because that's one thing in the industry as well. A lot of accountants, a lot of chartered accountants like to gatekeep what they do. They purposely make accounting sound really complex and complicated, and we're doing all these weird accounting treatments and you'll never understand it, because they're worried as soon as the client understands it, they'll do it themselves, which is utter nonsense, because business owners don't have the time to do accounting. But if they understand how to do it, and if they feel like they could do it, they value what we do even more. And it's more collaborative, because we're able to have a conversation about the accounting rather than me just saying, oh, profit's this and cash flow is looking good for the next 6 months. Instead of them just nodding and agreeing, they'll question it and we'll have a conversation about it, and you gain a lot more value out of that than if only one side of that relationship understands what they're talking about. So I've talked mainly about the first business I set up, which was 5 years ago now, which has flown by. That's like scary. But that first business, called Heat and Fences, that's our main accounting practice, which works primarily with kind of more established businesses at this point. Not so much startups, but more what we call scale ups. So they've gone to like the next phase and they're looking to grow, and they're looking for like even sometimes the exit plan. Since then, we set up, weirdly, another accounting firm, but bear with me. That accounting firm is more for startups and early stage businesses. That's called Days Accounting, which I could probably do a whole other video on that, because that one, again, we lean heavily into the branding. And remember what I said at the start of the video about choosing the brand name and how that kind of is perceived to the audience, to the clients. So we went with Days, which isn't either of our names. It's not the traditional route of naming an accounting firm or a professional services firm. And the reason for that is because that firm kind of operates without us as the founders. So the clients don't have us as the sort of client managers, you could say. So it kind of detaches us from the business, which is what we wanted. But the beauty of it is that it's still part of the Heat and Fences group. So clients of Days, just starting out, they can become a client there. And then the idea is that as they grow and their business gets bigger and they need more support and maybe more hand holding, they can come across to Heaton Fences and get just that. Business number 3 was, and again, bear with me, a marketing business. And I get questions all the time when I say that. It's like, hang on, how have you gone from setting up an accounting firm, setting up a second accounting firm, and then setting up a marketing business? How does that work? And why did you do it? And the answer is pretty simple, is that marketing is always the follow-up conversation once we've dealt with a business's finances. And that's because once we've cleared up all of the simple finance stuff of the business, where are things at, how can we improve it, what's the end goal, done. It's always, okay, let's talk about your goals. Most of the time it's, I want to grow my business for whatever reason that is. It could be to sell, it could be to get investors. But the point is they say, okay, I want to grow. And we ask them, okay, how are you going to grow? And the conversation always goes on to marketing. How are you going to get your business out there? How are you going to get more customers in, more clients in? And up until now, we've just had to pass them over to either marketing agencies we know of, or maybe some freelancers that focus on just those areas that the business owner needs. But it always ends up being really fragmented. And particularly, if we send them over to an agency, they end up spending tens of thousands of pounds on really shit marketing. So the idea was that, okay, can we bring that in-house and provide that as another service line alongside the finance, accountancy, business consultancy? And the idea was yes. And actually that was just really good timing for us, in that a friend of ours, we've known only through the industry. So in the last 4 or 5 years, basically had a bit more free time, and we just opened up the conversation about starting up this marketing business, what it would look like, kind of how it would differ from other marketing businesses. And it was just that. It's a founder-led marketing business, but it's also just an additional service line from our main practice, Heaton Fences. So that's a really new business. So we're kind of just getting that off the ground and having some really good conversations with clients at the moment to see what support they need and how kind of that would fit in with their other services with us. The other business, the fourth business, that's again a really new one, and I only started calling it a business very recently, since I had a conversation with someone who focuses in this world. And I say that because it's a podcast, and I didn't want to treat it as a business from day one. I just thought, okay, well, we're just spending on marketing. It's just a cost in the business. And I spoke to someone who works in the industry, has worked in the industry for years now, and he said, no, you're going to make a mistake if you don't treat it like a business, because it costs you money. And he asked the question, what do you want to get out of it? And I said, well, I guess more clients. He said, well, there you go. You've got your cost, and that's what you're looking for in terms of your return. And I thought, okay, that's fair enough. Okay, it's a business. So now I treat it as a business. So that's 4 businesses. And so that podcast is called Authentic Founders, and I'll probably leave a link to it somewhere if somebody wants to subscribe to that, which is basically what it says in the tin. It's myself and Emilio, my co-founder, talking about our journey and our experiences with the business from day one to kind of where we are now, and just what we've learned along the way. With, again, similar to this channel, and is that we're hoping that other business owners who have started and maybe feel a bit lost, or they're not able to kind of get to the next level, hopefully they can take some value from that and be able to do that, be able to get to the next level from listening to us and our failures and our wins and everything in between. But also people that haven't started yet, we're hoping that will inspire them to just start. It's not as difficult as some people might have you believe. And I did mention that we're soon to have a 5th business, which is crazy to me. I think when you get this feeling of creating a business and creating the brand, the identity, and putting it out there in the world, there's such a good feeling about that. Like I said, it's like that, being able to have that release of creativity is, yeah, it's just a really good feeling, and I think I crave it now. So yeah, we're soon to have a fifth business, and I'll probably talk about that later on in another episode, because the business, we have created it, but we haven't kind of launched it yet or done anything with it. So I might leave that for a bit, and I'll probably prep a bit more for a better video to talk you through it, because it's quite an exciting business, and really interesting, I'd say, about how we came to creating it and why we did. So stick with me for that one. Yeah, so I'll leave this video there for now. And I think in the next video, I'd probably go through the realities of running multiple businesses and what it actually means. I might show you a bit more detail of kind of what a day looks like, perhaps. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.